From being the underdog company that couldn't even break into Western appeal, to selling 1 million copies of their new shiny games in 24 hours, Atlus would be a company of many highs and lows. The 6th generation is arguably one of the most influential times in the gaming industry, and I think anyone who's even remotely into video games can agree that companies were trying everything they possibly could with the graphical boost of 6th gen consoles, which led to some very interesting and beloved gems that are very well respected today. But for Atlus, this generation would be their tipping point, preparing to make a series of decisions that would determine whether they would sink into obscurity or become one of the biggest JRPG developers in the modern era. This would be the most iconic era for Atlus as a company because of just how much creativity and passion lied with each and every entry that they released. Atlus in modern day is probably around 10 times more successful than they ever were in this generation, even announcing remakes and remasters to games from this era to mountains of hype. But honestly, how did Atlus even get to this point with such niche games that just didn't appeal to everyone the same way Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, or Fire Emblem did? I mean, I was literally watching the Xbox game show when the Persona 4 remake was announced, and I swear the viewer count dropped significantly after Persona 4 was announced. Almost like a lot of these people were just waiting to see if Atlus would even drop anything. But it was also kind of rumored and leaked that Persona 4 was getting a remake. But Atlus had basically done the impossible. After many years of being trapped in obscurity, they somehow had broken into the Western market with the kind of games that they make, and their projects would be so much larger in scope of their previous titles. Centered around dark themes of chaos, isolation, and demonology for the SMT series, aka the Shin Megami Tensei series, the 2000s would become some of the best years for Atlus. And one method that Atlus succeeded in would be the extremely bold artistic direction in their games. In almost every single title, there's something extremely unique about them, and this would be tied to the start of Atlus honing their skills in the UI direction, especially within Personas 3 and 4. The company would utilize two of the most important assets contributing to their unique style, Kazuma Kaneko being the art designer, and Shoji Meguro being the composer. This man single-handedly took over every major project the company worked on during this era: Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, Digital Devil Saga 1 and 2, the Devil Summoner Raidou Kuzunoha games, and both Personas 3 and 4. Working on hundreds of songs for each title, it would bring very different genres for every entry, going from rock to jazz to J-pop and more. The edge of the SMT series, specifically in this era, was, and honestly in some ways still is, unmatched. There was just something here with these games, especially within the third mainline entry that kicked off what I like to call the golden era of Atlus. Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, featuring Dante from the Devil May Cry series, is in a lot of ways the poster child of SMT and what this series represents. This game pushed the series in a way the franchise hasn't really seen before. It refined the battle system immensely, setting the groundwork for what is now known as the press turn system, where every mainline SMT game now continues to use and refine. It had one of the greatest soundtracks in the series, where lead composer Shoji Meguro completely took over and became well known within the company. Shoji would go on to compose multiple projects with the company soon after, and this game would just be known for how excruciatingly unforgiving the difficulty can be. Being the niche series that Shin Megami Tensei was at the time, Atlus would actually have a strategic move to include Dante from the Devil May Cry series as a cameo in Nocturne, since Devil May Cry was more popular and known within the West. They would end up forging a deal with Capcom to include Dante into Nocturne, and this would actually lead into Dante and Virgil's Devil Triggers in DMC3 being drawn by Atlus, specifically Kazuma Kaneko, who was the lead character designer of the series at the time. Being that this was the first SMT game to even be translated at this point, besides the US version of Persona 1, this would be somewhat of a decent move to get people to even check out the series at all. Dante is also a demon hunter, which fits this plot, but they would seemingly add his DMC2 character, which is more serious and determined rather than his normal wacky and eccentric personality. The plot of Nocturne would open not with the destruction of the world, but with its arrival instead. Tokyo completely folds in on itself, being crushed like paper under an unseen force. Cities become vanished, people are erased and the world is completely hollowed out. The event that destroyed Tokyo would be called the Conception, and the world would get put into a dreamlike state, waiting for someone to give this emptiness some sort of meaning. Nocturne makes it very clear that you are not the hero of this world. You're merely another idea crawling from the wreckage. The Demi-Fiend would awaken something in between, a creature not quite man but also not quite demon. Marked with glowing tattoos and severed from the human race, you're given no destiny, only a choice. And this is essentially the message behind Nocturne. It's a world from philosophy and not prophecy. For this era of Atlus, atmosphere is literally everything. It always has been for their games, especially within SMT, but due to how much more power they had working on the PlayStation 2, they were really able to bring all their crazy ideas to life. This game is very lonely, and that's not to be taken lightly. More than half of this game is you exploring the wasteland of a ruined world that used to be bustling with life. The NPC count is super minimal, there are 0 human party members, and the human characters that are actually involved with the story are all harboring different ideologies, and you really only see them a couple of times throughout the game. And the people you meet outside in the wastelands are literally demons, both passively and not passively. The soundtrack, while still being one of the all-time greatest in Atlus's catalog, still does a good job at feeling very minimal, which matches with the world and scenery. There's distant howls from time to time, and some of the architecture just feels completely unnatural, which can give this game kind of a dreamlike feel. The lyrics of Nocturne also do a really good job at its intensity, with the lack of budget actually working in their favor as they skipped out on voice acting and an actual singer for the vocals. The monotone, silent characters added to the uncomfortable and heavy vibe that they were trying to nail, and as for the music, Atlus would instead use a text-to-speech voice named Albert. The vocals in this game are extremely distorted and sometimes even hard to understand. The voice is filtered and doesn't even sound human at times, and the best example of this is something you might have already heard, but it's one of the more famous tracks of the game. Alright, so I know it probably felt like someone just casted a demonic spell on you with that song, but that's just the beauty of Albert's vocals. Also, these lyrics are taken directly from the King James Bible, specifically the Book of Revelation, which is a little scary. The other songs would also have a lot of religious involvement with the lyrics, specifically the distorted Albert voice, with the main battle theme speaking directly from our main character's point of view. The main character you play as is named Naoki, and he would be named Demi-Fiend after the world-ending conception and transformation. This would be one of the most iconic creations of Atlus's protagonist. I mean, even his cover art is probably the best I think I've ever seen. He's probably not as iconic as someone like Joker from Persona 5, but for anyone who's a bit deeper into these games than just Persona, you most likely have seen this design before. The glowing tattoos makes his design a bit more complex, but on a surface level, it's still pretty simplistic. I mean, this is kind of just a guy with glowing tattoos. But the design was just so iconic that they even tried to revitalize it with our protagonist Nanashi in SMT4 Apocalypse, which looked fine, I guess. And they just keep bringing him back in other SMT games as an optional boss to fight, usually with him being the most difficult boss in the game. His presence is kind of like a power statement. Whenever he's in literally any of these games, just prepare to get absolutely rocked for hours before even getting remotely close to killing him. Nocturne was loved for many reasons, and the beauty of it all is, well, this is what Atlus used to just start their leap into the new generation. The inspiration from this game would heavily trickle down to their future SMT and Persona projects, and even though this game didn't directly receive the amount of praise it deserved at the time, with it only selling around 150,000 copies in Japan on its first year, the lasting impact that Nocturne had on this entire franchise was just more than enough. And even today, with Atlus having 20 times more success than they ever had in this time period, Nocturne is still extremely respected and well received. I just kinda wish Atlus also understood this well, and didn't treat it so horribly on its remaster. From here, Atlus would go on to create yet another spin-off for SMT, but this one was really different. They would go on to create a more narrative-driven SMT game close to what they would want out of Persona, but still keeping it SMT with its themes and nihilistic premise. This game would be called Shin Megami Tensei Digital Devil Saga and was released in 2005 for the PS2.
Rend, slaughter, devour your enemies. There is no other way to survive. You cannot escape your hunger. Warriors of Purgatory.
I don't wanna try to fight this love. How dangerous can it be? No, the odds are so unfavorable, and honesty's forsakable. So many run for safety.
This game would be very heavily influenced and focused on the ideologies and philosophies of Hindu and Buddhism. This game also ended up kind of being in like the top 5 of best SMT games that I've ever played. Digital Devil Saga was really not like other SMT games. This game would focus on a never-ending war in a setting called the Junkyard, which is a place divided into 6 tribes, with each tribe trying to be the last one standing in order to send to a place named Nirvana, which is sort of a mythical promised land where people can be at peace and away from all the violence. Surf would be the name of our protagonist, and is also the leader of the Embryon, which is the tribe that you and the main cast is a part of. The game would be a lot tighter with its narrative compared to Nocturne, where in Nocturne's case, interpretation was crucial to even enjoy the plot. Alongside this, the characters would be more fleshed out and humanized so much more than previous SMT games, or even older mainline SMT games like SMT 1 and 2. The characters have lots of dialogue and banter within the group, and even some more lighthearted moments. This game would be a great project for Atlus to stretch their creativity, especially with how around this time their creative projects would get smaller and smaller, especially with their later releases just releasing what seems to be primarily Persona and SMT titles. And eventually, even spin-off titles like this would just seem to come to a complete stop, as after this generation, Raidou Kuzunoha would be the last Shin Megami Tensei spin-off that Atlus has really created. With Digital Devil Saga just fixating on Hindu and Buddhist themes, this would also give its narrative more of a tight-knit direction to follow as well. Most SMT games really focus on Gnosticism, Christianity, and broader religious and mythological themes, giving those games a plethora of ideas and enemy types to pull from. Even the basis on how Shin Megami Tensei works is based on the alignment system of Law, Chaos, and Neutral. These would be the usual SMT endings that you can get for every game, with Law representing a hierarchy structure with absolute order, Chaos representing ultimate freedom, power, and survival of the fittest, and Neutral being a rejection of the extreme. The neutral alignment seems to balance both Law and Chaos ideologies, and emphasizes human freedom without giving into the extremes of absolute anarchy and divine law rulers. This would also play into why mainline SMT games are just so diverse, from the demons and angels that are just in all of these games, to the characters of the story and the course of your actions and game endings. This is completely flipped on its head in Digital Devil Saga, as it's built on Hindu and Buddhist cosmology. The Junkyard, which is the main setting of the game, represents samsara, which is birth, death, and rebirth. Achieving nirvana is explained as achieving the place of ultimate truth, beyond violence, identity, and rebirth. Having some heavy themes that differ from the rest of the SMT games, this game would also be played a little differently. The press turn battle system is still here, of course, but your party members that fight with you are your team, and you can't actually use any demons to fight with you. Early into the plot, you and your team would be in the middle of a battle, and a mysterious black egg would start emitting a weird light. It would cause all of the tribes of the Junkyard to transform into a monstrous being, with a demonic and uncontrollable hunger and desire for human flesh. This would present a new motivation for conquering the Junkyard, consuming your own opponents to survive. In all of these fights, and even in the normal battles, you can literally choose to just devour your enemies if their health is low enough, which will grant you something called Atma. Atma would be points that you can use to upgrade your mantra grid, giving you lots of new moves and abilities. The naming and ideas of these mechanics are also behind Hinduism. Mantra relating to the path of the individual's awakening, given why it's a skill tree where you get more powerful and transform into your greater self. The demonic transformation that all of these characters have to deal with now makes the Junkyard even more of a high-risk setting. Before, you were able to kind of get away with not being as aggressive or hiding away, but now you also have an unquenchable desire to devour your enemies, as it's literally the only way to satisfy your hunger. The main cast here is especially a highlight, as they start off as pretty distant people, only to lead into a decently strong bond through the trauma of the Junkyard. Everyone's pretty likable here, and I ended up really liking this dude so much that I actually named my bird after him. There's a lot of growth throughout the story, and the game does a really good job at showing just how the desire to devour your enemies starts to chip away at their humanity. From the pushback of eating other tribes in the beginning, to the understanding of the game that they have to play in order to ascend to Nirvana, which they would then proceed to devour without question. And as good as this game is on the plot side of things, Digital Devil Saga 1 would ask question after question with little to no answer. Questions like, who is the mysterious girl from the start? What is the Junkyard? And why do the tribes have to fight to achieve Nirvana? What is Nirvana and what does it hold? Why do the tribes have an insufferable desire for human flesh? And so much more. A lot of very interesting concepts are brung up in this game, and and there are little to no answers for just about any of it. The game even ends on a massive cliffhanger, leaving a lot to be desired. But that's because the entire goal of this game was to have it act as a plot setup, leading into the sequel, which would be a direct continuation where the first game left off. The way the sequel of this game works in this duology is less of another game in the same world and plot, and rather a part 2 to the part 1. You genuinely cannot skip this game if you finish Digital Devil Saga 1 because almost nothing gets answered or explained in the first game. Everything is saved for its sequel, being Shin Megami Tensei Digital Devil Saga 2. Digital Devil Saga 2 would be released in 2005 in North America. This game is basically the same game as Digital Devil Saga, but with a few minor tweaks in gameplay. Alongside this, it would be starting off really hot, with a cutscene that nobody would really understand at a first glance, even if you were able to finish the first game. This game would give you all the answers that you were looking for and delve deeper into the concepts started in Digital Devil Saga 1, all while going deeper into the concepts of samsara, which is birth, death, and rebirth. I love this game so much for the simple fact that everything here is completely ramped up to 11. The first game was slower, more atmospheric, and dreadful. Even the battle theme would be heavy, slow, and gritty. Versus the sequel, Digital Devil Saga 2, it would have a battle theme that's just so much more energetic and fast-paced. Fun fact, hearing this battle theme for the first time with little to no context is literally what made me start up this series the following day. It's just that good. And through hearing the main battle theme for the first time, it really does set the tone for this game as a whole. This is the game to wrap up the series of Digital Devil Saga. A lot of stuff happens, and the music is just much more energetic and intense. I don't think I'm the only one when I say this, but I really think that Digital Devil Saga is among the best work that Shoji Meguro has worked on. Some days I feel like it's literally the best soundtrack he's ever worked on. Digital Devil Saga is in some ways one of the most important spin-offs of Atlus, as it's such a unique standout to what the SMT franchise is. And the fact that this has zero modern ports or anything is beyond criminal. Alright, so the year is 2005, YouTube has just dropped, Resident Evil 4 released to critical acclaim, Valve had just released the groundbreaking Half-Life 2. This was an overall pretty solid and memorable year for gaming. The only problem is that Atlus was going completely broke. One of the lead creators of Atlus, Katsura Hashino, would become the lead creative within the company due to his genre-defining Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, and very creative and underrated Shin Megami Tensei Digital Devil Saga. But while having some of the coolest and higher scale games that they have made since the start of the series, or even the start of the company, they were still struggling financially and the future was looking really bleak. Letting go of a bit of their staff, the company would most likely want to work with something safe and low risk in order to lock in sales so that they can get going again financially. But Hashino had a different idea on how he wanted to move forward with the company. Hashino was convinced that working on a flashy title that drastically differs from the games they've made currently, and also slightly emulates their popular JRPG peers, while still being its own thing, would be a step in the right direction. He wanted to go all out on this new title and wanted Shoji Meguro producing the music, since he's absolutely destroyed any soundtrack he's been tied to so far. But there was a slight issue. Hashino wanted to go all out on this new title, which is completely fine, except for the fact that they didn't really have the budget to go crazy on another title. But Hashino was determined either way, and wanted to go through with a new and innovative project, knowing that this could either save the company, or be the last title that Atlus will ever make. That title was Persona 3. Persona 3 is, as it states, the third entry in the Persona series, but this is the game where Atlus really captured something. Not saying that they haven't before, because they definitely have, but this time they would have captured something that is not only new and creative, but also something that resonated with a lot more people than their other games. And that is the unending themes of life, death, and purpose, which Persona 3 tackles heavily. I think Hashino chose to go forward with Persona 3 because even from the first two Persona titles, they were more personal with a big modern teenage cast, and kind of followed events of just going around doing their own thing in a story that tackles the supernatural and has very relatable themes. It was the perfect series for the shift in gameplay as well. The only other Atlus title that would be available for this kind of change, in my opinion, would be the SMT Devil Summoner series. But the first game in the series wasn't even translated and also had a setting that wasn't exactly modern day, which I feel like can hinder its growth and worldwide appeal. But Persona 3 is in some ways one of the most important games that Atlus has made. This game completely saved them from bankruptcy. It changed the formula entirely for the Persona series. series, and marked a stylistic evolution in their games. In modern day, literally any game from this company will have you staring at their menus and UI at all times when playing. It's something that's kind of been jammed in with their brand now, and it's really cool to see. Persona 3's stylish UI is a lot simpler compared to the games that they're making today, of course, but there's still a lot of intentional design and style within the UI and menus of Persona 3. But the biggest change of this title would be within the gameplay. So this is still a turn-based JRPG, of course, but it's also a life simulator in a sense. There's two sides of this game. One of them is fighting shadows, progressing in the dungeon, leveling up, getting stronger personas on your team, and enjoying the turn-based combat. The other side is, again, a life simulator. Talking to your friends, progressing their social link, which is basically your relationship with them, picking and choosing when to explore Tartarus, and maybe even getting a part-time job for some extra yen. The duality of gameplay from a traditional JRPG to a social life simulator with interesting and complex characters is amazing, and people were seriously enjoying this. From my experience, games with a calendar system are just extremely fun because of how addicting they are, and to have a game where you can do both was extremely out there for the time. Alongside that, these social links were actually pretty interesting to go through, going from some guy who really wants to bang his teacher for some reason, to a social link of someone who is dying and wants to spend the last of his days writing and finishing a project that he's passionate about, which brings a lot of meaning towards him. There were some stinkers in there that were just unenjoyable to interact with, but the overall concept was executed extremely well for their first time. The grim motifs positioned by the plot and character backstories would all be really engaging, but a big reason on why they would arguably be more engaging than previous titles would be because of the social link system, where you can get to know them more on a personal level, where they would explain things in their life that aren't really brought to focus in the main plot. And for the biggest and most undoubtedly peak new addition to this game that set it apart from any Atlus game ever was the fact that you can have a girlfriend. Alongside this, the game would also add Persona Awakenings, which would become one of the most symbolic and integral parts of the Persona series. This would go on to be a part of the beginning of every single game, where our protagonist would awaken to his power. And the awakening process is usually something that directly represents the themes of said game. The characters would summon their personas in a new way, unlike the cast of Personas 1 and 2. In Persona 3, the characters would point a tool called an invoker to their head, which is in the shape of a gun. It's not a real gun, but when pushed against your head, it's literally supposed to trick your brain to simulate the rush you would get from committing suicide, which is enough to drive your persona out of your body and have it fight by your side, showing that you're fully prepared to die at any given moment with this kind of power. This is definitely one of the most extreme in the entire series. I mean, in Persona 4, you smash a tarot card to reject lies and show acceptance to your real self, and in Persona 5, you rip off a mask to show rebellion to social oppression. There is a lot of blood in Persona 5's Awakening, but Persona 3 would definitely take the cake for most edge in terms of its implications. Alongside this, Atlus would make the battle system a lot more streamlined for people to enjoy. It was engaging enough for people to latch onto, but it also wasn't excruciatingly difficult like the press turn system of SMT to make you smash your controller. The SMT series has always been a bit more underrated than other JRPGs, but Persona 3 literally saved the Persona series from obscurity, as the Persona series up to this point has always been in the shadow of SMT. Persona 1 was way on the obscure side, Persona 2 was well received but still didn't break into major popularity, but Persona 3 is really what pushed Persona into the public eye. While not as bleak or ideological as mainline Shin Megami Tensei, Persona 3 still tackled identity, free will, and the supernatural very effectively. It softened the SMT philosophical edge without losing depth, making it more accessible without being completely shallow. The game was so good that it just had another release a year later, being called Persona 3 Fez, which added an expansion that followed the story of the original game and gave it a proper send-off, except that it just wasn't super well received. It then went on for a PSP release, adding a female protagonist, and of course the 2024 remake of this game made it even more popular. Persona 3 just resonated with so many people because themes of death are universal. Plus, with the new social link system, it really did make you feel like you were just a high school kid trying to balance friendships and school while also dealing with supernatural forces. It had a lot of subliminal messaging all over the game, saying things like "you are going to die" and "memento mori." Makoto Yuki is definitely a silent protagonist, but holds so much more personality within how he's portrayed within the cutscenes and dialogue options. Losing both parents at a very early age, Makoto would be, for a lack of better word, pretty closed off as a person. You could even say he's a bit depressed, honestly. As weird as it sounds, he opens up throughout the game, getting closer with his classmates and roommates, and by the end of the game, he's a completely different person, opening up to life and possibly even having an entirely new perspective on how to live to the fullest, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people resonated with. But while Persona 3 was inward and reflective, Atlus was simultaneously working on another game that explored a different kind of existential dread, one rooted in history, tradition, and the occult, instead of modern alienation, and that game was Devil Summoner Raidou Kuzunoha vs. a Soulless Army in 2006. Raidou Kuzunoha looked backwards, exploring how identity is shaped by duty, history, and the unseen forces that bind society. But before I jump into Raidou, I want to highlight a very underrated Atlus game that nobody seems to know about. This is more of an honorable mention, but it's a game that's very much a forgotten relic in Atlus's catalog. Co-developed by Atlus and another studio named Pinegrow, this is a tactical RPG that aimed to capture a different vibe than your typical JRPG and even Atlus title. It would also focus on uncertain hope, especially as the world is on the brink of extinction. The name of this game would be called Stella Dues. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Stella Dues would be a pretty cool game that flopped financially, with it only starting with about 12 people and ending with 78 people working on the art design and programming. The legendary Soejima, whose work would really be known for the SMT and Persona series, worked on the art in Stella Dues and aimed for a sense of quiet beauty within its visuals, incorporating a very muted look within its colors, having a lot of dusty browns, gray colors, and also faded green colors throughout its 45-hour runtime. Being set in the fictional world of Solemn, the planet is slowly being consumed by a deadly mist known as the miasma. With the deadly news circulating, the general public would be set into panic and despair, with various factions on the rise with different beliefs and ideologies on how to confront the future of the world. Our protagonist, which is named Sparrow, which also means hope in Latin, would have to navigate all of these beliefs without a clear, direct answer. Some factions believe that purging the sinners would bring an end to the malaise, and other factions kind of embrace a sense of nihilism, believing that the end to the world is natural and deserved. The game, also being a tactical RPG, is of course grid-based, where positioning and battle strategy is very important. There's a lot of character classes like swordsmen, archers, alchemists, and priests with their own unique abilities and progression paths. Stella Dues tells a story of a dying world and existentialism extremely well. The conflict between science and religion and the human response to the inevitable demise is extremely well executed and engaging. It challenges players to consider the value of action versus acceptance and the moral complexities of survival. And the general art style here is just genuinely phenomenal. I mean, it's super unique and just enjoyable to look at, especially within the official art of the game. And while I'm really not crazy about this kind of gameplay, I thought the game's overall vibe was pretty cool, and I actually enjoyed the story for what it was. Hopefully more people would check this one out, as it definitely got buried super deep within the Atlus catalog for its own good. Going back to the Megami Tensei franchise, specifically with Devil Summoner Raidou Kuzunoha, this would be a game developed by Atlus that is extremely unique. Its uniqueness and importance lies within the fact that this is one of the last Shin Megami Tensei spin-off games developed by Atlus ever. Being worked on around the same time as Persona 3, I believe this was where Atlus started to incorporate different studios for their games. With Persona 3 selling so well, the Persona series would be left to a studio named P Studio, which is a sub-studio under Atlus. With Persona 3 being super experimental, they also wanted to try some new things in the Megami Tensei series to make it a little different. The only thing is that this would have way less of a budget compared to the other titles of the Megami Tensei franchise. Devil Summoner Raidou Kuzunoha would be a duology that would take place in the same universe as the original Devil Summoner games in 1995 that were also developed by Atlus. But Raidou would take a different approach as a historical offshoot, exploring a different time, tone, and approach with the supernatural rather than the original game's cyberpunk aesthetics. Unlike the other SMT games, Raidou takes place in the Taisho era of Japan, more specifically the early 1900s. The Devil Summoner series is one of the most consistently stylish series that Atlus has ever created within their entire catalog. Whether the original from 1995, the Devil Summoner Soul Hacker series, and even this piece of garbage has some cool design and style to it. And then of course we would have the Devil Summoner Raidou Kuzunoha games. Starting with the protagonist being Raidou Kuzunoha, he isn't really a blank slate like the other protags, he's a Devil Summoner, which is basically a supernatural detective. Raidou's real name would be called Johei, but this game would never actually call him by his real name, and would instead call him by his title, Raidou, which is a title of elite Devil Summoners passed down who protect Japan from supernatural forces. Raidou would be the 14th to own the title. The design of Raidou is genuinely just top tier. I have yet to find anyone who doesn't even like this design, and I think that this is Atlus's most fashionable protagonist yet. In the story, Raidou would also be partners with his friend Narumi, who runs his own detective agency. The setup would work a little something like people would call the agency for supernatural cases, Narumi would probably procrastinate or something, and then Raidou would be on the case. It's kinda like Dante's Devil May Cry agency, but more detective style. This game would have a bunch of new ideas, from the supernatural mysteries to the noir-like atmosphere, and a more traditional Japanese approach. It touches on the occult, human corruption, and more hidden power struggles in the underbelly of a corrupt and supernatural society. It's less about an apocalypse apocalypse or nihilism, and more on personal duty and bettering the world. The gameplay of this game is probably the most interesting part of it, as it's not even turn-based. It's one of the first attempts at an action game for Atlus, and it's probably one of the worst aspects of the game. I commend them for being super innovative at the time, allowing you to fight with your demons in the same playing field, but yeah, it's not really the best. My boy Raidou was actually packing one singular combo, and the gun damage was just utter balls. Thankfully, the sequel to this game would balance out the combat a lot better, making the action seem a lot faster, allowing you to summon two demons with much better demon AI, and having better demon synergy between each other. There were different bullet types and more sword types, more combos and different weapon types. The gameplay of Raidou 2 isn't perfect, but damn is it fun. Alongside this, both of the Raidou games would have a very strong jazzy band soundtrack, showing that Shoji Meguro can handle just about any setting you throw at him, whether that is apocalyptic, modern, or traditional Taisho detective. A lot of the soundtrack would have more jazzy touches. The more action parts of the game would lean more into its upbeat and rock sounds, fused with some traditional sounds to a soundtrack they have yet to replicate. I love the soundtracks of these games so much because overall they sound so much more relaxed than any other Atlus game. It's kind of like something that you would get out of a Saturday morning cartoon, which I guess makes sense as the chapters are split up into episodes. I mean, the opening alone was enough to get me to immediately get excited, but literally nothing prepared me for one of the final themes of the first game, literally called Shock, which is also in my top 5 of best Megaten themes ever. Raidou 2 would also expand on the supernatural extremely well, having more characters and other summoners that take part in the story, showing other aspects of the world that doesn't only deal with the bustling city streets of Sukudo-cho. Thankfully, this wasn't really much of a forgotten relic as it was at the time of making this script, as the Raidou 1 remaster is already out, which is probably one of the best remasters I think Atlus has ever made. In fact, calling this game a remaster is more of a disservice if anything, as it plays a lot closer to a softer remake. But honestly, I really don't think anyone would have expected this game to even get a remaster/remake, especially with the rise of the Persona series and just how Atlus never really mentions anything in this series. But hopefully this can be a new beginning for Raidou again, where hopefully they can remaster the second game, and also maybe continue the games for Raidou Kuzunoha. This entire era of Atlus has been going extremely smoothly since 2003 with the release of Nocturne. For anyone actually tapped into these games at the time, you must have been eating extremely good. I mean, everything that they've dropped has been extremely solid, with games like Persona 3 and SMT Nocturne being classics that people still can't let go of today. I definitely wasn't old enough to enjoy any of these games when I was younger, which is why I ended up just going back in the Atlus catalog to play some of their older games. And the fact that most to all of these games have aged so well that you can still play them now without any issues is a true testament to the creative and innovative ideas the company had during this time. I mean, I'm definitely not the only one who's gone back to binge their older games due to just how well they've aged. With back-to-back hits and gems, you would expect them to run out of steam just a little bit and slow down the production process. But with only 2 years passing of Persona 3, Atlus would drop the next installment of the Persona series, Persona 4.
We are living our lives above with so much information.
There's a really common theme of the Persona games that kind of goes like the first game you play will probably be the one that you love the most. And I guess you really could say that's the case for me. Persona 4 stuck with me the most out of all the games I've played because of the amazing cast of characters and themes it represented. But I also love the soundtrack and the overall aesthetics of this game more than any other game in the series. So much so that I just couldn't stop giving Atlus my money by just buying their games. Right off the bat, you can tell that this feels extremely different than Persona 3. The opening animation and song named Pursuing My True Self is upbeat, catchy, and also has a strong 2000s J-pop feel with mysterious silhouette visuals, versus the Burn My Dread opening of Persona 3, where it was very symbolic and heavy within its visuals, while also having the music have more of a J-rock approach. A large part of the fanbase at the time genuinely just couldn't understand the direction that Atlus went with Persona 4 after Persona 3, and for good reason. I mean, in a lot of ways, Persona 4 seems like it was trying to be the exact opposite of the game before it. This game is so much happier and upbeat versus the depressing state of everything and everyone that is Persona 3. And if the themes and overall color palette aren't enough, the setting of Persona 4 contrasts the city of Persona 3 the absolute most. Persona 4 takes place in Yaso Inaba, and you would follow a protagonist named Yu Narukami, moving in with his uncle Dojima for a year due to his parents working overseas. Dojima would be a very busy detective who has very little time for his own daughter, leaving her to be a very isolated child. Yaso Inaba is more of a country-like setting where nothing is special. There's a small shopping district, but most of the locals would just go to a supermarket called Junes to hang out, which is probably the main attraction of this place, a literal supermarket. On paper, this is the most boring setting that you could possibly have for a video game, but this would also happen to be my favorite setting in the Persona series. It's a small town in Japan where everyone knows everyone. It creates this beautiful small town feel to it where you would slowly become acquainted with everything here, and start to love the town the more you play. Even the characters of this game would refer as Inaba as boring and empty, only to develop a deep love for their hometown. Simultaneously, you as the player would cultivate a deep attachment to the setting and people within the town. And as for the music, it's absolutely timeless. And thanks to the singer Shihoko Hirata, this game's music would sound like a early 2000s pop album.
Tell me why you did it, every dream falling apart. Tell me why you did it after the promise. Still aching, oh baby, I need your love. Looking so deep, like gliding street light. Signs of love, all the shadows, my dreams. Baby, don't worry, 'cause you ain't alone. Only time, running days without nights. Please, just do.
If we're specifically talking about Persona, this is the peak right here. This is my favorite. But while this is also a Persona game with supernatural elements and Persona plot-wise, this is also a murder mystery. Soon after Narukami would settle into his new place at Dojima's house, there would be a series of strange murders around the town, with the killer hanging his victims upside down on telephone wires. A phenomenon known as the Midnight Channel would appear on rainy nights, and Narukami and his friends would be able to enter what they would call the TV world, in order to find the culprit and answers to these strange phenomenons. Alongside the plot, I think the cast of characters are genuinely the most enjoyable group of characters that I've ever experienced in a video game. The voice acting here is beyond amazing, and these characters feel like genuine friends. This might sound like a weird thing to compliment a game for, but the game also has really good humor, kind of. There's a lot of moments where the group would hang out as friends outside of school and completely unrelated to the plot, which I feel like there just wasn't enough of in the previous entries. Persona 4 would also take these strange supernatural elements and would instead create a separate world for these occurrences, being the TV world, rather than fuse them with the real world like Persona 3. Where Persona 3 would deal with death and the meaning of life, Persona 4 would instead deal with themes of truth, identity, and friendship, with a very big emphasis on truth, and to also accept yourself and all of your flaws for who you are, letting go of all the negativity that holds you back from embracing yourself and finding your place in society. I feel like these themes are just so much more relatable and enjoyable, and I also really enjoyed the execution of it all more than the themes of death and purpose in my opinion. Mentioning the Persona summonings again, instead of pointing a gun to their head, they would instead smash a card rejecting their false identity and embracing their true self, which is also represented by their persona. I personally loved the change of Persona 3 to Persona 4 and really enjoyed Atlus going through with vastly different themes in each game. That 2000s edge isn't really in your face here as it was in the previous entry, and as much as I enjoyed that edge, I think Persona 4 stuck with me a lot harder than any other entry in the Megami Tensei catalog. Persona 4 impacted me personally as this was the first game that introduced me to the Persona series, and after a little while that hyperfixation would transfer over to the Shin Megami Tensei series as a whole. This was even the first time I even dabbled with a game featuring turn-based combat. Never before would I expect to even enjoy a game with combat like this. The lineup going from 2003's SMT Nocturne to 2009 with Persona 4 and Raidou 2 would literally be Atlus's generational run, being home to some straight hitters in the Atlus catalog. The creativity here was just unparalleled, and I think I gravitate to this era so much because, yes, I like Atlus games, but it's also because of how non-experimental they are nowadays. Don't get me wrong, Atlus is usually trying new things, but the golden era of experimentation is so well appreciated because they just weren't afraid to try something completely new with this franchise. I mean, they had two original spin-offs being Digital Devil Saga and the Raidou duology, on top of changing the entire formula with Persona 3, and also having that influence their future works. After this era, Atlus would devolve into countless spin-offs of Persona 4, giving us 2 Persona 4 animes, 2 Persona 4 fighting games, a spin-off where the cast of Persona 3 and 4 would meet up together, and don't forget about the Persona 4 dancing game, all of which act as kind of a sequel in a sense as well. Spin-offs of mainline SMT wouldn't be something that Atlus would be too curious on trying anymore, and to even fathom an original title without the Megami Tensei name is extremely few and far between. There is the Catherine of 2011, which I really enjoyed, but other than that, the only big title to come out of this company would be Metaphor ReFantazio in 2024, which I thought was one of the best games that they've had in a long time. But with the remaster of Nocturne in 2021, and the remake of Persona 3 selling like wildfire, and the very polished remaster of Raidou 1, I think even Atlus is noticing the gold that they're sitting on right now from this era. And that's not even mentioning the fact that Persona 4 is literally announced for a remake. But I do think that we're headed in a really good direction when it comes to what we can expect from Atlus in the future. I think they'll be bringing back some good older titles, and hopefully become more experimental with their releases. But I also hope that they understand that there is a fine line that shouldn't be crossed. We don't need another one of these.
I'm spitting gold bars, and your talk is cheaper. I'm the RS, and I don't fear no Reaper.
I'm no Reaper, but I can send you to hell. So face the music, RS, and take the L.